In this lesson, we're going to remove the weakest link of access to your router, configuration access, and that is via a password. Password has always been the weak link, and we're going to use SSH keys to eliminate the use of a password. Of course, to do that, you have to access the router via SSH initially, and then you can enable your SSL so you can run your Webfig. Here we have a document file showing the various steps to get this SSH key login to work. So step one, we got to generate your own keys on your local Linux machine, and this is the syntax to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that syntax. Move this out of the way for a little bit. Notice I have two terminals open. One terminal is connected to the actual router, and the other terminal is just on this local machine. So on this local machine, I'm going to paste in this command. It's going to create a public-private key pair for me. Notice 8192 takes a while to generate that. Okay, after about 15 seconds with this 8192 length of key generation, it finally finishes. Now it's asking for a file name for your key. This is the private key, so I'm going to call it lin1, so I'll know what it is. This is empty a passphrase. If you want to have a passphrase that makes your key more secure, it also requires two things for anyone to log in. They need the key and they also need the passphrase. So I'm going to use a passphrase and actually repeat it. Now it's saved two files. It's saved lin1 and lin1.pub. Pub is a public file, the one you put out there on your router, and lin1 is a private file, the one you keep on your computer in a secure location. So on our steps up here, we said show your new keys with the ls command. So we'll just type ls, and sure enough, there they are, lin1 and lin1pub. So our next step up here is copy the public key to the router files using Webfig. So to do that, we come up to our Webfig, and we go to our files. We can't drag and drop like you can in Winbox, but what we can do is upload a file. It takes you back to the file system on your local computer. We're going to upload lin1.pub. So just select it and say OK. Now I notice I have lin1.pub. So our next step then is to install the router public key to a username using Webfig. So we'll come over here under System to find our users. Down here's our users. And we're going to use this add user. And if you notice, there's nothing here about keys. You got to click on the SSH keys tab, and then you got to import a new key. And here you specify the username, which in our case is add user. And you have to define the key file, which is lin1.pub. And then we click on import the SSH key, and now we have a user with a key. If we go back and look at users in general, we have both users. We also have a user with a key, and our active users shows that we're using SSH. It doesn't talk about a key. The only place you see the key is right here under SSH keys. So we did something a little different. We added an 8192 key length to make it more secure. So let's take a look at what that means. We'll go over here to IP, and under IP we come down and look for SSH. And here it defines the SSH key that we have existing. Forwarding enabled, no, that means you can't use this router to go to somebody else with a key. Always allow password login. We do not have that checked. That means you can't use SSH with a password. You can only use keys with it. Strong crypto as a default, and allow none crypto. That means do not allow SSH connection without a key. And then the host key size. You notice this says 4096. We made it 8192. That's why it came here. So let's make this 8192 so they match up and apply that. Now we should have a key on the router that works with our private key on our local computer. So let's see what our next step is. Test the key from a local Linux machine. We're going to use this syntax to test it. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here to my terminal on the local machine, which is this one. I'm going to right click and paste. Enter password, unlock the private key. Remember, I gave my key a password. This is not a router password. This is a password to use my private key. So I'm going to put in my key passphrase. hit enter, and now we're logged in. Notice I didn't use a router password. A router password won't work with SSH. So we are now logged into the router securely using our private and public keys. I want you to note that this syntax, what you need, is going to be down in the video file description on YouTube. So you can just copy and paste these things. I don't recommend you do that because then you don't remember the syntax. The more you type it, the better the memory develops to use it in the future. So this concludes how to install a key pair so that your local Linux machine can talk to your router, your Mikrotik router machine. Some of you may have noticed that earlier in this video you had a double bottom panel bar here on the screen. That's because I made a mistake using SSR for the first time. Turns out that SSR has to use an ACC audio format or else my Windows video editor could not edit the program. It couldn't hear the file. VLC heard it fine, but you couldn't capture it on a Windows machine. So I had to go back and replay the video, capturing it using ACC. And then that's what I used instead of remaking those video recordings. So here I wanted to jump in here and talk about once you've decided to use SSH with a key, then you have to have that key to get back into this router. If you screw up configuring somehow and you lose your key, then there's no way back. You can't just reboot the router back to factory settings and then restore the backup, because restoring the backup will once again require the SSH key. So that doesn't work. So what I suggest is, in this particular case, when you're finished configuring, you've tested everything, you know it works fine, save the backup with the SSL enabled. That way you always can get back in with your Webfig. Go ahead and remove the key that doesn't work anymore, install a new key, and then save the backup again, and then reboot the router and come back up and log in using your new key. This is imperative because, like I say, you cannot get back to this configuration without a key or without www-ssl access. So in closing, I hope that this makes sense to you, that it gives you much more protection. It protects your router inherently against administrative changes because they have to have two things. They have to have the actual private key, which you should hold in a secure area. And in my case, they have to have the passphrase to use that key. So this pretty much makes sure nobody's going to log in your router. We don't have to worry about locking out people on Wi-Fi or locking out certain addresses. We locked everybody out with this key requirement. So hopefully this video will help make your router more secure as far as admin changes go, and eliminates the use of passwords to access the router configuration. Remember, if you disable SSL, then that still uses a password, but you can't get in there if the service is turned off. So it reduces your footprint by using this SSH with a key.